It's been 5 months almost since I recorded my last episode, A Great Longing for Home. And a lot has happened in that time. I am neck deep in game development still, and things are going great actually with the project. I have many worries about it, but I am anxiety free. And I know that we are making something pretty special that is uniquely the combination of talents of me, the artist, and the programmer who came on right around the time of my last episode. I'm not going to talk a lot about that project right now. I think that is something that I want to talk about in upcoming episodes. And yes, I am going to be coming back and talking about this new era of my life, which is the foundation of this very episode. I left last time in a state of uncertainty. A lot of that uncertainty has been answered, and it's been an incredible journey. I'm going to start this episode with a quote that I think will probably help you understand what this has all been about. It's a quote by Tolkien, who's becoming very quickly, actually, becoming a major guiding star in what I want to do with my art. Tolkien was a Catholic author who, while the work itself wasn't a Christian work, it was thematically infused into the very fiber of the world that he created. And I want to do something similar. But this quote is the framework for this episode. It simply isn't an adventure worth telling if there aren't any dragons. Last episode, I was left asking a major question. Where would we find peace? Montreal was artful and European. It had beautiful architecture, all the things that were kind of a touchstone for us in Stockholm. But the truth was, our daughter didn't really want to go. She actually had a really strong aversion against it. And she was there visiting with us when we went to Montreal for a week just to check it out. And I think, if I'm being honest, while I did really think it was a beautiful city, something wasn't right about it. And I think as we came closer to the decision, I started to ask probably the most important question, which was, what was best for her, for my daughter, after everything that she'd lost? Because she'd lost as much as we did. And as a child, she was 10 when we made this final decision. She's moved so much that it's only fair to really think about, what does the next 8 years for her look like? So time was ticking away. We hadn't made any decisions, and it came down to one weekend where my wife went to a family funeral out of the city, and we had a bit of a talk before she left, and we both felt it was time to really start thinking about what we were going to do. Time was ticking down. We were getting closer to July, which is when we knew we would have to make a move to settle in so that our daughter could go to school. So I dug in while my wife was gone, and I put together maybe the best spreadsheet of all time. And it was based on some criteria that we had discussed prior to her leaving. And, for us, it was a lot of things were high up on that list. Walkability, so that we could, take our bikes to get groceries, or having a good community around us. We were trying to relate all the things that we really loved about Sweden, and we categorized all the destinations that we were looking at to move and just seeing where they ranked. And then my game design brain kicked in, and I made a full spreadsheet with numbers and formulas. Anyway, I may post it because it's pretty fantastic. And eventually I came to a result just on the numbers alone. And so my wife came back and I sat her down for a very formal presentation and I showed her a shocking result. And that's where we ended up moving. But I'm not going to bury the lead on this one. I want to talk about how we got there. Because right around that same time, an old, terrifying wound returned. Right when we had made this decision. And it felt as though it was a barrier, the last barrier to making a major transition in our lives. The last great hurdle in the adventure story that we had been telling for 10 years. What sent us out from Vancouver all those years ago. I had one final dragon to slay. Welcome to the Sons of Men podcast. This is episode 20, Slay the Dragon. 2 years ago, I got an email. I was still living in Stockholm at the time, and it was from the past. I've talked before about a falling out with an artist. That fallout has, followed me for 10 years. Every year, without fail, this artist brings up what happened between us and spins it in a very, very, I would say, one-sided light. And not to say that what she was saying doesn't have some truth to it, and I'll get into that. But I have a reputation through her that is not true. And I received an email from her that scared us. We had put together a collection of Rat Queens, the comic book series that I had worked with her on, and her work was included. And I hadn't reached out to tell her that would be the case, but she would be paid for the work for a portion of the sales based on her work. And I thought that would be fine, but it actually doesn't matter. If you want to read exactly what happened, you can find it on my website, but I'm going to discuss a little bit what led to my eventual post. We were scared. We had moved to Sweden and honestly had forgotten that life. We were completely cut off from it. And I think that was, really a extension of God's grace to give us a place to heal and find time just as a family to recover from the fear. But here it was again, and I didn't know what to do. A part of me wanted to run, but I was challenged by it. And this is very early into my newfound faith in Christ. And running just didn't feel like something that, and everything that I had learned was the right move. And in particular, I was attending a church in Stockholm, and the sermon that week was Christ's command to love your enemy. You've heard me talk about that before. And I was challenged to respond, this angry, accusing email, to really look at this artist and respond with love. I have to tell you, it was the hardest thing I ever did, but I did. I tried to find a way to empathize and see this artist's perspective. And I did. I responded with love. I didn't really understand why I was meant to do it that way. I just did. I felt, it is commanded in the Sermon on the Mount. And so I did. The email's complaints were that the art was being included and I wasn't consulting the artist. And also old accusations of screwing her over and ruining her life, and how she, took bullets for me. And the truth was that I did treat her unprofessionally. It was not working out creatively, but I did not treat her professionally. I did seek to replace her before I had told her that she was off the series and that she was going to be fired. That was completely unprofessional and hurtful. And in my email, I did own that, and I apologized. And I told her that her art was undoubtedly part of the whole of what Rat Queens was. And I felt it would be an injustice to the fans if I didn't include that work. The email wasn't received well. She just emailed back more accusations and wanted me to make public statements, and I wasn't ready at that time. It felt like a trap, if I'm being honest. But 2 years passed until, as I said earlier, this topic, this conversation came up again shortly after we decided where we were going to move. And that email was spun in a very dark way. It made me look like a incredible villain. And it was crazy because I couldn't believe that that was the email that she was going to spin, that I basically told her that I was happy she was homeless and that I wished nothing but the worst for her, when my email said anything but that. I had it on record, everything that I actually said. So in that moment, I felt the dragon rise up, and I almost ran. If you want to read that story, if you want to know more about the dragon and how I slayed it, you can go to my website. The post is the last blog post that I put on there. I sat down and I contemplated, do I finally say something? My reputation, my character is once again being spun, and people that I admired were sharing this story, writers and artists that I really look up to. 10 years later, 10 years, it's still going on. And I almost ran, but my wife insisted no more. And I think if anything, if I've learned, it's that my wife's wisdom in times like this is the most important thing I can hear. And she actually said to me, when this all happened 10 years ago, she said to me in this iteration, I said we should have said something 10 years ago, but you silenced me. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I think that's true. I did. And, it happened the way it did, and we went on this journey anyway. But this time I was going to listen. So I sat down and I began to write. It was time to face the dragon. And I wrote straight from my heart everything that had happened in the past 10 years. And I've shared it here. I've talked to you about it. I don't hold any resentment in my heart. Even in my post, I talk about how in many ways I'm grateful for what has happened. I'm grateful because it's led me here. And for a good hour after I wrote the post, I stared at it and I felt an anxiety wash over me that I have not felt in many, many years. And I prayed for peace. And I did. I felt peace wash over me, and I posted my side. And I felt genuinely in that moment, that email that I sent 2 years ago was to help me right now in that moment. It was served up to me. It was like the sword was put in my hand. It was incredible. And my statement was received well. And it didn't receive huge traction. And I don't think that's really the point. I don't think that's what it was meant to do. It helped me let go and conquer the fear of my ruination, that I could finally move on. Full circle. I could finally heal and move into the next era of my life. And I realized how much this idea of what the world perceived me as had held me back, had kept me from fearless action, of true courage. And I realized that for all the other people I was willing to stand up for, I had never afforded myself that same grace. And finally, I could return home, healed and with renewed heart, mind, and soul. On July 3rd, we arrived in the new city for our family, Saskatoon, where this entire journey began. My friend Owen, who you've heard speak and I've talked about often, he said, it's as though time is going in reverse for you. And I thought it was a really funny statement, but I actually realized how poignant it was. It is true. I live now in Saskatoon with less materially than when I left it 13 years ago. I made a fortune and I lost it all on this journey. I left Saskatoon to pursue my dream of writing, and now I return with a dream of a humble, creative life. I am surrounded by friends and family, and for the first time since leaving Sweden, I feel like I'm home. And maybe it was the act of slaying the dragon. Maybe it is the city. All I know is I dropped my daughter at a new school this morning, and it felt like a new day. The first in the rest of this next era. And I am excited about what lies in store for us. I lived in the shadow of a dragon for 10 years. I ran, I numbed my terror, and by the grace of God, I survived it, though barely. That fear held me back from my art and from my potential because I lived in a perpetual state of what if. And that's exactly what holds us back from any great adventure, from experiencing life to a fullness we could never expect. I can't help but think that we should all make the what if a statement of awe and curiosity and not fear. Forgive yourself and others. Stand up for others courageously. Take a risk. Go on an adventure. Slay the dragon. God bless.